Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Perez, and after reading chapter 11 in the Wright textbook, I found myself making a lot of connections with my own personal experience with language learning. The first topic that I want to talk about really quickly is understanding your students' cultural capital and being able to teach in a way that's reflective of their culture and their understanding in regards to language learning. So while I was an undergrad, I took a course that was entitled Teaching English Internationally. And so the premise of the course was to prepare future English teachers to go abroad and teach English. And so my instructor, who had been doing this for quite some time, she was teaching a classroom of students, and what she would like to do is she would like to use students' names in grammar examples to make it fun, to make it collaborative, to make it inclusive, so to speak. And when she got to one student, and she was of Japanese descent, and she had used her name in an example, and her student became very embarrassed and very shy, and it was something that was super effective for her, and not in a positive way. And the teacher was flustered and didn't understand why, like what was going on, until later on she had found out that don't quote me because I'm not 100% sure, but I think along the lines of that, it was something that they typically don't do in Japan, and it could be quite embarrassing for a student to be called by their teacher by their first name. And so that really, it stayed with me, and I really thought, there's so many things that we may not understand because we're not doing things with a malicious intent, but sometimes it could come off in a way that is negative for our students. And you really want to make an environment where students feel like they're welcome, and of course you want to be inclusive, but to keep that low risk factor as low as possible, so students are engaged and they have opportunities to make mistakes while learning their targeted language. The second topic that I wanted to talk about was translanguaging strategies, of being able to use translanguaging in a sense to make meaningful connections with language. This one I resonated with a lot as a student, not as an educator, but when I was in college, I studied Korean for 3 years. I don't have any Korean background, like it was me just doing it on a whim. And I realized that I was doing all these translanguaging strategies without even realizing what the name was. It's what what bilinguals do just naturally. And I was using all the language resources that I had internally to be able to make really meaningful connections with new vocabulary, with syntax, with grammar patterns and things like that. So giving the opportunity to have your students use translanguaging strategies so that they can process the language and not create environments where it's strictly a monolingual perspective. Like, I think as we're inching into the future and we're seeing more DLI programs come about, a problem is that a lot of, maybe some teachers will say, I only want my students speaking a certain language because I want them to get as much language practice as they can, but the textbook says that it's not the best, it's not ideal to create an environment where it's like 100% one language. It's okay for your students to use their language resources so that they make meaningful connections with the targeted language, and not reprimand students for indulging in translanguaging practices. So that's my quick little presentation. Thanks.